I'm Rufus Wainwright, and this is a journey into the making of Unfollow the Rules.
I was going round from the town to the country.
It's really a fantastic album I made with David Boucher and the great Mitchell Froom.
Lost my train of thought. It was far out.
Okay, here we go.
You ain't big unless you're big in Alabama.
About 7 years ago, I released my last sort of quote-unquote pop record, and it was called Out of the Game, and I made it with Mark Ronson.
Doesn't really matter at all.
I think I was a little overly enthusiastic about it. I loved the album, but I did think, probably because of Mark Ronson, that I was going to suddenly be, Adele. Thank God that didn't happen. That would have been weird. So I went off and I worked on my opera stuff for a few years. Because of my great love of opera, I really wanted to immerse myself fully in that universe. And in order to do so, I had to kind of totally disappear into it, which is what happened. I wrote 2 operas, Prima Donna and Hadrian. So it was a successful venture. It was worth the trip. But I started to miss where I'd come from as a singer-songwriter. I started to really appreciate where I came from. So writing songs became a kind of protective layer that I could really escape into that. I think I was sort of reignited, and in terms of my passion for songwriting. And then my husband and I decided to move to California. We got a place in Laurel Canyon, and we started to look for producers for this group of songs that I'd written. I would send out the whole batch of material, which was over 30 songs, I think. And I got a lot of positive responses from a lot of people. But it was really when I sat down with Mitchell in his studio in the back of his house when it just happened. In the first 2 minutes of sitting down, he immediately had a game plan, and he had immediately picked out songs that he liked, and he kind of had this vision for the record.
This one's for the ladies.
They were all good songs. Out of respect for his musicianship and his knowledge and just how great he is, I tried to develop a bunch of ideas. It wasn't at all about ego or anything, and Rufus was very open to some suggestions. Just forget about it and do it. More romantically or something.
Okay. Just so you know, I was humoring you at that point.
Of course you were.
Sounds great! I'm so excited for this record. Shit.
Sweeping strings.
There you go.
Sometimes I feel like my heart turns to dust.
What I heard was kind of astonishing. I just looked at it in terms of which ones might resonate in a way that seemed simple somehow.
Sometimes I feel like my brain.
But for whatever reason, they just seemed like they hooked you in the most. I'm just open to this, just to see what happens.
I'd worked with a lot of other producers over the years, and there was certainly, for most of my career, this kind of edge that I occasionally, take out of its sheath and really, fight for what I thought should be on my record.
Strings will bring the brand back in.
Okay. With this record, I was ready to just surrender in a lot of ways.
It didn't feel like you were relinquishing anything, to be honest.
I know. I think there was something with this record where there's a maturity, I guess, that I was kind of really utilizing finally. I was like, let's just make a really great record and have fun with this. When we went to Sound City, that was sort of the baptism. Welcome to the studio.
I was going round from the town to the country.
Well, now that got that drum sound.
There was always an idea of this return to California. That was always there when Mitchell and I started making the record. There was definitely this concept that I was coming back to LA to claim my legacy, my deserved legacy as a survivor of the music business.
To the back of my crown, there's always trouble in paradise.
I think at the point when I'd left, I was definitely in this pattern of like going into the studio, making a record, touring, getting disappointed, going into the studio, making a record, touring. I wasn't always disappointed, but it was always, it's a rocky road, shall we say. For this album, we didn't have any axe to grind, I guess.
I mean, I looked at you as someone that you just knew what you were doing. You kind of knew what you wanted. And then it was just like, what ideas could I bring? Which ones do you like? Which ones don't? What ideas could musicians bring? Which ones do you like? Which ones you don't? That's what it felt like. Maybe in the past, if you're making a record, there's this pressure that the producer feels to deliver for the label, and then there's this...
We didn't have a label.
Yeah, there's that.
Ta-da!
But that was helpful because we just found the way that seemed best.
Yeah.
So we tried to bring all this different color and attitude to some different songs. There was a few songs where we'd use two guitarists, like Damsel in Distress.
Play a little harder.
The big guitar opening with those two guys, one on nylon and one on steel, makes this really big sound.
Will you forever be the damsel in distress?
Damsel in Distress is a song I wrote because my mother was jealous. Okay, I'll just explain it now. We weren't allowed to listen to Joni Mitchell in the house. It was verboten because my mother, Kate McGarrigle, who was an incredible singer-songwriter, she was from a very intense kind of folkocracy that had very stern kind of beliefs in terms of what folk music was and who should be singing it. And somehow for her, Joni Mitchell was a fraud in her mind. So that's one side. The other side, though, is that I think my mother was incredibly jealous of Joni Mitchell. My mother, who had been signed to Warner Brothers many years ago, didn't kind of have this swagger that some of her contemporaries did, and she always felt, I don't know, she felt like she hadn't made it in the music business and had to kind of return back to Montreal, defeated. So I think Joni Mitchell for her was sort of this, I don't know, it was this double-edged sword. So there was like a strange vibe around her, needless to say. And then years later, Jorn, my husband, who didn't know anything about her because he grew up in Germany, he became familiar with her music and subsequently became a massive Joni Mitchell fanatic. I then went through his discovery of her music and was, of course, blown away and got her importance. So I then wrote this song, Damsel in Distress, and then my sister Martha, who on hearing it said, "Oh, you just wrote, that's a Joni Mitchell song." So I kind of consider it my Joni Mitchell acceptance speech. I have to say, and this is a testament to you, Mitchell, is that song could have inhabited like a real solid, homage to, Laurel Canyon vibe, which there's a part of it that is that, but it's really the stuff that you added, like with the clapping, which made it, in certain ways, and some of the sounds that you came up with, but making it more interesting in that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we feel the same. I mean, it seems like the best music, often you can find the roots of where it comes from, but you don't want to go back and make something sound like 1970. What's the point? It's just lack of creativity. Yeah, I mean, it's possible if we just like this.
Okay. first album, that record took about 3 years to make. This record also took about 3 years, technically.
We first got together and we did Alone Time, and then I think there was like 3 months, 4 months to just finalize the songs. We had a lot of discussion of who was going to play on what, then trying to arrange everybody's time. It was not easy. We didn't have the luxury of the old days where we had an endless budget where we could just go in with musicians, spend a few days even trying to get a track. So we had to come in with very strong starting place ideas.
What's fascinating about any work of any kind is that even the moments that you're not there, slugging it out in the studio or writing the songs, even when you're in a whole other universe or doing a whole other thing, there's still this little engine in the back of your head that's doing push-ups and thinking about, the next move subconsciously. And I think this record has that added kind of, I don't know, it's like almost a subconscious element where even though, I didn't work on it, hand over fist for 3 years, it was nonetheless always thought about and always really, really thought out.
We just needed some place to start.
And just practicing.
Finally got the guys together. Then we recorded 2 songs a day at Sound City, and they're not easy songs.
Only the people that love may dream.
Jim Keltner, he was the first sort of major classic session player that I'd ever worked with when I made my first record. When he came into the studio, that was my first ever introduction to this sort of, really majestic, legendary legacy that he had. And we immediately bonded.
I've had a tremendous career playing on records with some of the greatest artists in the world, Rufus being one of them. He is such a fantastic performer.
I was so young at the time. I was, in my early 20s, and a lot of people around me were a little bit put off occasionally or overly, interested. But when Jim talked to me, he was the first person of that stature who I felt was actually, just giving me some real encouragement that kept me going. So then to have him come in again years later was very meaningful, and he played on 2 songs.
Everyone else out of judge.
Back in 1973, I played on his dad's record. Then years later, I get a call to go record with this kid named Rufus Wainwright. I was loud and son. Went into the studio and met him, and we proceeded to play on some songs together. It was fantastic. Great feel he has, a great way of phrasing on the piano and singing. That's real fun for a drummer to grab hold of.
His version of time isn't a metronome. His version of time is, does it have its own deep feeling to it? And I think, particularly only the people that love it, you hear him play drums on it, it's immediately him. He can do it in a way that you feel it more than any drummer I know. And all the guys, they were all great. We got David Piltch, incredible bass player, upright bass player. Blake Mills, who of course he's a really fantastic guitarist. I thought particularly with you, he did a fantastic job.
Only the people.
His knowledge of music is such that it wasn't a stretch for him to go wherever your music went. And he could do it on the spot. So we got a lot of tracks that were just kind of spectacular.
What was great and also I think really important with Blake was that he's the linchpin, between this generation and Jim's. They felt like they could communicate through my music.
He mesmerized me.
They're of the highest level in terms of being able to make recordings, particularly backing someone like you. It was a nice feeling in the room because everyone was very happy to be there and very happy to play your music too. They all called me separately afterwards.
Where he comes in with the snare on the one, that's pretty nice, right?
It seemed like the right crew for what we were trying to do.
Now it reminds me, you always like the weird shit.
Yeah.
You always...
What's nice about being a dad and writing and making albums is that in the end of the day, you have to accept that you don't matter anymore. And it allows you to let go, I guess.
Sometimes I feel like my heart turns to dust. Unfollow the rules, unswallow the trust.
One day, our daughter Viva, she walked into the living room and exclaimed very dramatically, she said, "Daddy, it's just sometimes I want to unfollow the rules."
Unfollow the rules.
Immediately I knew that, there was something in that term that I had to write a song about.
Music is hard to talk about, and once in a while there's a song that's just so good. I would just really encourage people to just hear it.
Don't give me what I want.
It's deeply emotional. The melody is beautiful and it goes unexpected places. It shows off like almost in a Roy Orbison way what Rufus can do vocally. It's a really good song.
Arguably, one could spend quite a long time analyzing that song in terms of what happened during it and what it's about, because it's sort of, it's not about Viva, but at the time she was watching a lot of Disney animated things, and one of them was Hercules. And then also a friend of mine had a nervous breakdown, and she was having to go through heavy-duty therapy, and so that started to permeate into the song. Jorn and I had gone to see these incredible totem poles, the most famous totem poles in the world, in northern British Columbia, kind of near Alaska. And we were kind of racing along for 8 hours on this boat, and I was kind of looking at at the coastline, this incredible Canadian wilderness, and that's when I finished the song. It took a long time to write that song, and then finally I finished it. And to this day, I don't think I'll ever know quite what it's about or what it means or who it's even addressed to. But I think in the end, it's just about, re-examining the paths that brought us to where we are today, or just trying to figure out the way forward from there.
Rufus is a genius. He's a genius. He has, I think, one of the greatest voices of all time, and just getting to hear him sing is the ultimate magical moment for me.
You ain't big unless you're big in Alabama.
One of the great things about this period is that there is this return to vinyl, which is exciting for me because right when I started making albums, vinyl was really receding, and I didn't get to have vinyl copies of my first albums. I think they exist now, but what's nice about this album, Unfollow the Rules, is on a pop level, is my first, real album with vinyl in the forefront. It's kind of grand sensibility in terms of the visual aspects of this record. So the pictures, nice and big, and this is Unfollow the Rules. This was, our daughter wrote this, Unfollow the Rules, because she actually came up with the title of the record. And we have amazing liner notes by Linda Thompson. There's these illustrations, and they are all drawings that I've done for every song that I've been able to incorporate into the packaging. We were originally going to release it in April, but had to move it to July because of what's going on with the virus. And because, we really wanted there to be a physical product that people could touch and have this kind of tactile experience with.
I can't stop. I can't stop.
This one's for the ladies.
Once we produced the songs, and they each took on these very distinct characters, then it sort of started to fall in terms of the vinyl product, because with the number of songs that we had, it fit well on 3 sides of a vinyl record, and then there would be one side with an etching or something on that. And with that 3-part concept, it became like a 3-act situation. The first side, Trouble in Paradise and Damsel in Distress, these were very much a kind of direct reference to returning to California and being in Laurel Canyon and kind of taking on the mantle of the great songwriters who preceded me, and trying to keep that tradition going, and working in big studios with famous session players and stuff. So it kind of has that very old school approach. Then this, when you flip over the side and you go to the second side, and it starts with Romantical Man, which is a song about me in London, kind of my ode to England at that point. It returns more to the sort of romantic, psychedelic, old school Rufus. We're here in Hollywood, Jorn and I.
Oh, beautiful. Mwah.
Well, it's coming on to 13 years together, babe.
Peaceful Afternoon is a song that I wrote for my husband, Jorn. We have a tacit agreement, I should say, that I write a song about him on every album that I put out. I've fulfilled that requirement for a few records now, and it's a great joy to do it. Because it is actually it becomes a good old-fashioned love song, which we need more of in the world. The concept for the accompaniment is that I had been singing So Long Marianne by Leonard Cohen a lot with the guitar, and there's this kind of jangling, rousing way that I do it, but it always worked whenever I do it live. It's also that, let's all sing a song together vibe that I don't have a lot of in my shows.
I really liked the song, and certainly didn't seem like, Rufus has to do this to keep his marriage together or just keep peace in the house, or because there's really good humor in it, and I think for these kinds of records that Rufus does, people want just a glimpse into the character.
Ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, one more.
And then the third act happens. And it's just me alone on the piano, which is bringing it back to this more essential Rufus element, which is decidedly darker.
Early morning madness, everything is wrong.
Most of the songs on the third act are very dark. And we kind of enter into this, somber finale with things like Early Morning Madness or Hatred.
Gotta take a nap.
Songs that are very sad but also angry and all kind of the negative energy.
I had a great time working on this album. We did strings on 8 or 9 songs in the course of 3 days, trying to contribute to help the song flow and grow and kind of have arrangement payoffs that were worthy of the original material. It was a great challenge and a really fun thing to try to achieve.
For this record, and with this more, how can I say this, a tougher approach, it's an indication that I have hardened over the years in a good way and become, more, just become stronger, at least artistically. I'd rather overdub it. And that kind of translates for me in terms of certain great artists that I admire who, at latter parts of their careers, experience this resurgence and this kind of transformation into who they really were. I don't know if that'll happen. I don't know if it'll be regarded in that way, but I am definitely emulating this transformation that can occur for men in their 40s when they just become themselves in a lot of ways.
I played 4 songs with Rufus. The first song that he played when he came in was Early Morning Madness, and it was a lot like a freight train coming right through the studio without any notice. It was incredible.
It's a bit of a trap, the record, kind of welcomes you in this California dream, and then the second side of the album, you take acid with me, and we kind of go on these fun little trips, and then, you come down. It's not a happy ending, but it's a good ending in the sense that the listener or me, this performer, by the end, I have gone through the whole gamut of every emotion that's available, and I have decided to accept that and continue. It's not a nihilistic ending. It's a holistic sort of acceptance of what the world has to offer.
Hatred on the horizon must be assumed for the ascension. Shatter the scepter, lower the drawbridge, drain the moat, empty the catapult. Hatred on the horizon.
When I wrote Hatred, I was in a position of great distress. It was one of the devastating life moments that everybody has. And I realized that I had to really go to war to protect myself, and that this hatred that I was imbued with was, it's a battle cry, and I'm hoping to imbue the public with a little bit of wrath, in November with the election coming, because we have to get rid of the current president at all costs. When Mitchell was producing it, there was a moment where it started to sound a bit like the Phantom of the Opera, right? We wanted to kind of steer it out of melodrama, I guess.
A few things happened that were very helpful. One was at some point you said Blade Runner.
Yeah.
So it seemed to help it land in a really good way. Get up into this whole thing, and that's what it wants to do.
Okay.
Blake really helped it too. It was sounding just a little too positive, and I think I asked him, I said, could you just put a rhythm across it that has some edge, maybe even harmonically an edge, and he came up with a part that if you took it out, the song wouldn't be as good.
Working with Rufus, it was a special experience. I had a lot of respect for Rufus before working with him on this album, but once I found myself immersed in the material for this record, I realized how heavy of a writer he really is.
That was fun to do. Yeah. Who knows what it sounds like? Who knows what it sounds like?
I need a little alone time.
At At this point in my life, I am starting to see patterns, that develop over the years. And there's a definite kind of magic, I guess, that happens occasionally where, you enter into a project and somehow all the ingredients are there and all the forces are, conspiring to help you in that effort. And I think for this album, nobody had anything to prove, really. We just wanted to make the best music possible, and it's something that you can actually hear in the tracks.
To get you all I miss of
Getting to record someone who can sing like you is pretty special.
Aw, that's so sweet. Very sweet.
Our first 2 days together basically completed alone time. It was all basically leaning on you.
I wasn't prepared for that. I don't remember, but I don't know. David would know. It's like 100 vocal tracks. It was, but the most impressive part of it would be you'd sing for 4 or 5 hours, all these wide range of vocal ideas, and then you'd be very prepared to erase a lot of that.
Yeah.
Now, most people, if they did that much work and it sounded that cool, they wouldn't want to erase a note of it.
I think that having moved back to LA and also, really got so into the Laurel Canyon vibe, and then having the idea of working in some of the same studios at Ocean Way or Sound City, and working with some of those musicians like Jim Keltner, especially Jim Keltner for me. I was really starting to understand that legacy and that tradition. Certainly, with those harmonies, I knew if I was going to try something, trying to compare it to Brian Wilson, and his work, and the harmonies that he did, and that requires, a certain exactitude and no kind of mercy. If something doesn't work, get rid of it. So I wanted to sort of have little glimpses of that in the production, as a sort of, tip of the hat to my genius or something. And Mitchell was like, that just doesn't work, Rufus. It's like, you humored me, it's just important.
It's time to get a gong.
It's high time we get a bell in here. I felt that being this age, really hitting your 40s, I had a very keen sense that this is the time, to do what you've always wanted to do, whether it's write albums or write operas, I couldn't just walk away from everything that I had worked so hard to create since I started out. It was a risky move to walk away from my career the way I did. Very thankfully, I had a lot of fans who followed me into where I was going and enjoyed that journey. I was aware that I was definitely flirting with disaster, because it's not always easy to come back. And I think like any great work, there has to be a risk involved. And so this record, I feel for me, was worth the gamble.